You also made the comparison before in one of our previous conversations of it's like bowling when you have pins on two opposite sides. Which one are you going to hit? Because the likelihood of knocking both of them down is pretty much slim to none. So is there any indication of which pin he's trying to hit here or how he's navigating this?
He's bowling it straight down the middle between the 7 and the 10 pin. Margaret Thatcher said it's dangerous in the middle of the road because you get hit from both sides. And I think that that's his problem now. But he is an old fashioned politician in many ways. He really does tilt to whichever way the wind blows. And having been in the Senate for many years, you can see his shift in positions. And that's not because he's a deep thinker who's absolutely reevaluated his positions. He's just a weather vane. And mostly he's a weather vane for the Democratic Party. One thing that's changed in recent years, Brittany, and I find it interesting, in the old days, you used to have politicians who would run, let's say, to the left in the Democratic primary and then move back to the center in the general election. And they would run to the right in the Republican primary and move back to the center in the general election. That doesn't happen as much now. And it's an interesting question why. I think one of the reasons, well, one of their responses has been to work more on mobilizing your own voters rather than trying to get kind of undecided in the middle. But I actually think, I wonder what you think of this. I actually think a lot of it has to do with the fact that what you say in the primaries is now everything is captured on cell phones, everything is captured on video. You can't take one position in April and have a different position in July.
I think that's a great point because with the invention of Twitter and the invention of screenshots, I mean, it makes it impossible to say, no, I didn't say that because people have the receipts right there. And I am curious because usually foreign policy isn't a top concern for voters in the presidential election. Now there's a few wars going on abroad. Is it a big deal, this one?
Well, we don't know how big a deal it will be. It's certainly not at the top of anyone's agenda almost ever. The last time I can think of it being that prominent was in 1968 when we were in the midst of the Vietnam War, which is something that Bernie Sanders has brought up again. Of course, it's when his life peaked. But the fact is, um, even then, we had all these assassinations and we had chaos in the streets and we had a lot of other things going on. I think the fact that there's an open southern border, there's inflation, there's slow job growth, there's high interest rates, which make it hard to buy a house. Those kinds of things are going to be at the top of people's agenda. But let's talk about foreign policy for a second. The reason foreign policy is not at the top of people's agenda is partly because they can't see how it affects your life. You go home to your apartment or your home, Brittany. I do the same to mine. How exactly is a war of, in some distant region going to affect me? Whereas the price of beef being twice as high as it was does affect me. But I also think that one reason foreign policy plays a lesser role is that people think, well, the people in charge, they're experts. They really know what they're doing. Um, and and so what's happening with the Biden administration is twofold. One, the issues have become more prominent with the war in Gaza, but also people don't think Biden knows what he's doing. And that was a concept that was solidified with the failed withdrawal from Afghanistan. There's also been a failed policy toward Iran, but they haven't really been called out on that very much. The policy toward Iran under Trump was really squeeze them financially. They hardly had any money left at the end of the Trump administration. So it was very difficult for them to support all these regional allies that were part of their effort to become the hegemonic regional power. When Biden came in, he didn't remove very many of the sanctions, but they didn't enforce them. Iran is now rich, and the fact that U.S. oil production was cut down gave Iran this wonderful chance to jack up the price of its own oil and sell it. So the United States is now in the bizarre position of enriching countries like Venezuela and Iran and maybe Russia. But I think people no longer think that, oh, I can leave these matters in the capable hands of Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken. They may or may not know the names of the underlings, but they no longer think that any of this group knows what it's doing.